Hello everyone, welcome to the first part of the Sierra Chart crash course series. One of a few videos where we'll cover sort of the basics, get you up to speed as fast as possible, introduction to Sierra Chart. Now the reason why we're making these video series, two videos of which will feature the market profile and the footprint chart, is because we're getting a lot of our own traders on the floor migrated to Sierra Chart. And a lot of the people taking the course as course graduates or alumni who are also transitioning to Sierra Chart and want to have a sort of a comprehensive overview of exactly of how we set up things and an efficient way to prepare. So diving right from the beginning, what you'll be looking at here once you go to the Sierra Chart, the very first thing obviously is finding yourself the software download link, which goes as follows. Scroll down and then you should find the download Sierra Chart link. You'd click and save and download. And of course, if you haven't already, what you can also do is you can go to the account management page and also create a Sierra Chart account. Provided that you're going down this route and you're not being provided an account from your broker. Secondly, the other point of interest will be your account control panel, where you can make payments, view recurring payments, and understand your data and connection settings. Now, two more things will be of very big interest on the website. The documentation and the getting started page is also very comprehensive and very well developed for Sierra. I highly recommend, before you go to a much more complicated route of trying to figure out your problem or find a solution, is to really look through this documentation. And of course, there's also a forum where you most likely, if you've encountered a new problem, someone else may have as well, and you might be able to find a solution that way. Nevertheless, once your software has been downloaded, you'll be able to install it by going through the installer, and you will be presented with this screen. For the most part, you'd probably want to keep nearly everything the same unless you want to have a custom installation path, and also you can again leave everything as is. However, if you wish to use the Rhythmic data feed, you must tick this install additional components option as well to support the Rhythmic feed. And then once everything's set up and prepared, you can hit the install button. And once you do, you'll see a whole list of information being dumped on this window and a progress bar. Once that's done, you'll be able to hit close, and then you can find your Sierra installed. I've already installed Sierra on this PC, so in my case, I'll just go ahead and close this. And what you'll do is, more often than not, you'll be able to find your Sierra on the desktop. Now, you'll probably find two Sierra icons, but for most people, if you have a 64-bit computer, you'll be interested in opening this one's Sierra Chart 64. That applies to nearly all computers that have been made in the past few years. So likely for you, you should follow this 64 shortcut. Now once you double click on it, you'll be presented with the main login screen, and all you do here is enter your Sierra Chart, not your broker provided data feed, but your Sierra Chart direct username, password, with the various safe password options here. And I'll just go ahead, in my case, put in my user details, and then we'll hop into Sierra. Okay, now once you log in, you'll be presented with essentially this screen here. And the very first thing you'd want to do is go to File, and then Data Trade Service Settings here. And this is where you will plug in your data feed connection. If you'll notice, we've defaulted to the Sierra Chart SC Data All Services. That's provided for you already once you have a Sierra Chart account. And this is a very good service for obtaining free historical non-real-time data. And you can also obtain live data if you paid for the Sierra Chart Denali feed. And that now brings me to a very good point of explaining briefly how you can get efficiently connected to various data settings. Now, this is one point which trips up a lot of people at the beginning, because they rush in to get set up either through the broker or through Sierra, and then usually end up going through a lot of different choices, and then they end up spending a lot of money on the outset when it was quite avoidable. So I'd really recommend just taking the time to watch this part to really understand what you should do. So basically, you're presented now with two options due to some recent changes in the Sierra chart data connection format. So what the first basic way, if you have a brokerage account, of course, when you open that broker account, you'll be presented with the option to choose between a professional account and a non-professional account, and the differences between that is quite substantial. And of course, before you sign any of them, you should be aware of the requirements for either and be in the correct category. Now, what happens is, whichever account you open, you'll be connected with a broker, and then on the broker side, you have to contact them and tell them, I want to use Sierra and I want a third-party data feed. And that third-party data feed will be something like Rhythmic, CKG, or something of that sort. And then once you have that third-party data feed from your broker, you will be able to just connect it into Sierra chart. And the way you do that is you would go to this service up here, and then find your relevant feed. So for example, if you have the CKG feed, you would click on this, enter your username and password, and then go ahead and connect. If you have CTS, same thing, Rhythmic, and all other feeds as well. Now, so that's one route. Now, secondly, the other route is the fact that Denali provides the option. Sierra chart provides you the option where, if you are in possession of a non-pro account, which has been verified by your broker, and you connect Sierra chart to your broker by providing the proof that you hold non-pro status, you can then connect to the native feed that Sierra provides, which is now live and holds a vast amount of historical data and is generally very good. You can sign up for that, which will then directly plug into your Sierra chart. Thirdly, if you're not in the possession of a non-pro account and you have only a pro account, or you can't prove your non-pro account status, you can avoid the broker route altogether, go to your Sierra chart user account control, and directly pay for your data feeds there, and you should have access to those data feeds very quickly into Sierra chart. Now, I highly recommend for all to really take the time, go through the website, understand exactly the data trade services, the one you're signing up, the limitations. For example, now due to some recent changes, you have limited intraday data from some feeds, and exactly how this works. It's all very well documented in Sierra, so I recommend, if anything, to really look through these before you go on and commit yourself to a month's worth of data, which you may or may not need. Now, once you are connected to your relevant data feed, in our case, I'll just go ahead and connect to the default non-live Sierra, which you can see of usual relevance to us is these two options here, which are pretty self-explanatory: reconnect on failure and connect on program startup. This time zone here will be of most importance to you, because this is your global time zone for Sierra. This is the flag which everything is attached to in terms of time zone. So for us, being in London, we would commit to the London time zone, or of course the one that is relevant for yourself. Usually you can leave these to the default settings in here. If you paid for the Denali feed or the Sierra feed, of course, you should take this box, the allow support for Sierra chart data feed, and so on. And really the rest of it you can just leave as default, unless you have specific DTS requirement or something like that, which likely you'd consult the documentation for anyway. In which case you can go ahead and proceed. You can hit OK, and usually if you're not connected by now, the next step would just be going to File and then Connect to Data Feed. Once you're connected, you'll see it turns green, and then these numbers here will start building away and growing from 0. So that is basically the way we can get ourselves connected to the to some kind of date trade setting service. Okay, so now let's investigate how we can open up our first chart. The easiest route really to go down at the beginning is just go here to File and then do Find Symbol. Now the important part to understand is that Sierra treats intraday data and historical data as two different file types, which will become more apparent as we go through this crash course. But for now, what you want to do is just open up your first chart. Since we're basically here to just learn how to use them, you can go ahead and choose anything at random. In our case, I'll just go ahead and choose something from Eurex. You can scroll down and then usually find, of course, depending on which data feed, you may have these symbols a bit different, but everything should be a bit more self-explanatory. And we could choose our good friend here, the Bund. And once you expand for example, the contract you're looking at, the Bund, for example, on Eurex, you should be able to see a drop-down list of the contract months for that relevant futures contract. And in our case, we're trading now on the March 2021 contract. Once you do select it, you can go ahead and choose a daily or above or an intraday chart. We'll go ahead now and just do the intraday chart. And what will happen is now we will download and select, downloading historical data, and we will just let this populate and fill in. Now, while this is downloading, you may notice that, of course, since we've defaulted to something that we don't usually, you may use candlesticks, different colors, different schemes, and so on. You want to make changes. You then go to chart settings, and the way you would usually find this chart settings is either by clicking here on chart settings, or you can see a lot of the time you'll have shortcuts, and you can either press F5 or chart settings once you've clicked on the relevant chart. Okay, so here's this is the main window we will tinker a lot with. What you'll notice is that at first glance, the first point is the fact that we can load more or less data. Now, of course, if you want to go further back than 30 days, you can do so. But usually what would happen is if you have a lot of windows open and some charts do not require 30 days, but let's say only 5 days or something, you can reduce the load on your system by changing this to an appropriate amount. Most of the time, this price date display format will be correct. That will be determining on the price axis what kind of how it will display, unless you want to change something, to customize something there. You can very much click this, auto set from data feed, and that should be correct nearly all the time. If you'd want to go ahead and change this symbol, this contract you're looking at, you can see what it is, and then you can also click on Find to again choose a different contract, and it will keep all the settings the same other than changing the relevant symbol. Now you can see that we're on an intraday chart, and then the next thing that will interest us is the bar period type. Now if you click on this, we are on something called day, minutes, seconds per bar. That is your usual that is your usual sort of time frame, time split based bar. And then further down the list, we can see various different types of bar types. You can have volume bars, range bars or reversal bars for kind of rotational based bars, Renko bars, and so forth, point and figure bars. What you will not see here are market profile and footprint charts. Those are in the analysis section, which you can see at the top here, which we'll explain in a bit. So you will not find market profile and footprint charts. That is dealt separately. So in our case, we want to keep the time-based charts, and you can see here how we have day, minutes, seconds. This is the same pattern here. So now we're looking at a 1 minute chart, which you can see up here. If you want to change that to a 1 hourly chart, we can put in the 60 minutes here for an hour. Gap fills, if you like to fill in the gap or not, those are your options. And now here, these session times, again, these are actually very important for loading the correct kind of data you really want in Sierra. And I'll address this twice in this video series. To begin with, you would want to put in the correct timings for your for your market, depending if you want to have 24 hours or a cash session or out of cash session. And you'd also want to do it based on the time zone that you selected earlier in the data and trade settings. So in our case, we want to put in just the cash hours for the Bund from the London time zone. So you'd put in 7 a.m. Let's say till 6:15, 4:15 p.m. And if we click apply, you'll notice that actually what's happened on the chart is we have removed the data that falls out of that range. What happens now is the fact that not only have we removed this data, but what we can do is we can say use the evening session, and then we can configure what we will consider the day session and the evening session. So we can go ahead and put this in. What is good practice is, in fact, when you put your end time for any end period, is in fact to do this. So if I would like to put in 4:15, I can put in 4:14 and 59 seconds. And then at the start of the changeover, I can put in 4:15. Just 1 second difference, just so that the way the bars are calculated and the data is organized correctly. And then I can say I want the outside hours to go from 4:15 all the way back to this start time, which would be in our case 6:59:59, 1 second before this turnover. And if I hit apply, you can see now that not only will Sierra now splice things correctly in terms of the cash hours and out of cash hours, but also now if I tick or untick the use evening sessions, so now this is ticked, but if I untick this, it will keep these settings. But as you can see, it has removed again the cash ones. So if I just go ahead and and keep them, that should be a bit more self-explanatory over in this section. And that is quite important when we look at market profile and those kind of charts to really display data correctly. And here you can just choose if you want to exclude weekend data or keep it. It is of your choice. And this is one section which saves a lot of hassle a lot of the time. It is automatically roll over the future symbol. So when contracts expire and then we roll over, Sierra can do this for you. Much of the time it actually rolls over at the correct time compared to a lot of data packages, software packages. Sometimes it might do it a bit too early, especially for Eurex based connections. So you may want to double check that if you're not rolled over too early. But for most of the time you can leave this as is. And of course, if you want to keep these settings generally as your default, so in every chart you open, you do not want to input the same kind of thing, you can just tick this box to save these settings as default. And one last thing which interests us is selecting this candlestick bar here, just as it looks a bit nicer and cleaner. And again, you will not find the market profile or the footprint charts within the graph draw type. You will find them somewhere else, which I'll explain in a bit. You can find, for example, line-based charts or some other kinds of charts, but usually most of the time you can very much leave this as candlestick, because if your study or something requires different kinds, most of the time the study will change this automatically for you. Now the next part that's usually you can find yourself spending a bit of time in is the advanced settings. And in here, most of the time you can leave most of these settings as is. The only two important areas which may interest you is the continuous contract option. So because in the futures market you have the rollover, and then you have one contract expiring and the next one becomes the front month where much of the main business is now being transacted at. The way we move from one contract to another creates problems when we look at older historical data. Now you can tell Sierra to just not put in this continuous contract, but what you can do, you can tell it to stitch various older charts together to make it just look at like one long continuous chart. Whether this is a prudent thing to do from a trading perspective, that is debatable, but really, if in doubt, either just leave it as none, or by my recommendation, if you'd really like to do it, you can do this volume-based rollover back adjusted chart, and Sierra will usually roll it correctly at the right time. And if I hit apply, you can see that Sierra will now download all the data for you and stitch it very accurately together, so we can view the charts further back in time. Now, another thing that'll interest you is that, yes, we are using the global time zone, so that is the time zone we established at the beginning of the video. But if you so wish to have a chart that is specifically overriding these settings, you can go ahead and choose the relevant override settings. But in our case, we want to stick with the global settings, the global time zone, which we have set in in the earlier part of that video. And for the most part, really, you can leave these as default unless you specifically need to change anything, which you can find in the documentation. But really, as a beginner, for someone who needs to use basic charts, this is fine as is. In the advanced settings too, again, you could be spending a bit more time here, depending on your requirements. Just to draw your attention, this deals more with workflow and how you adjust your charts. Again, I will be going over this section a lot more in detail later on, but this is a section you can name your charts. You can exclude or include volume and filter, have a filter out some kind of volume. And this is where you can use chart linking or copying chart drawings, so you can automatically shift some kind of charts without having to do everything manually. This is of great use of just saving a lot of hassle, and it just improve your workflow generally. But again, we'll address this a bit later, but just so you know, this is available. Advanced settings 3, most of the time really you will not be spending a lot of time in here unless you want to do something very specific. And then alerts, again, if you wish to use alerts, you can look it up in the documentation. But for the most part, for most users, you'll be spending your time in these 3 tabs: main settings, advanced settings 1 and 2. Okay, so now that we're done, we can hit apply, and we can see how we've sort of optimized our chart for our preferences. Now that we've looked at chart settings, one other thing which you may be wondering is, how do I change the color settings, the graphics, and so on? Now, for the most part, the one place you'd want to spend most of your time is going to global settings, and then graphic settings global. And this will be the sort of the main default, your overriding settings for changing nearly all of your charts. So for example, and you can scroll down through here, and then you can see the relevant settings for everything. It's usually quite intuitively set. So for example, if you want to adjust your depth of market window to a different color, they're all grouped together. For the most part, the most often used tools will be towards the top. So you can see how, for example, chart text is set to white. We can see how chart background is set to black, chart grid and gray, and so on. So let's say we want to change the chart background to something a bit more grayish. We can change it there, hit apply, and since we've changed our global settings, it has now done it for all our charts. In this case, we only have one. But then we can say, okay, we want to change our chart text perhaps, and then we can hit there, and then it stands out a bit more. Now, what you should always do is, of course, save your settings. But what Sierra can also do is you can have multiple setting profiles. So if we click on the first one and we do save settings, it'll ask us, do you want to put all these settings into one configuration? And we should probably give it a name. Let's call it test for now, and just hit yes. And then you'll notice that we have saved this as test. Now, if I want to change them to another setting, let's say the default, I can go to 2 and I can do load settings, and you can see how we've gone back to our previous ones, but we want to stay, for example, on test. So we will just load that, and then we can easily flip. Now, going on to the next part is that, again, if you want to change fonts, everything is in here, and then other, but again, most of the time you'll not be spending at the beginning too much time within here. So this is usually the main place you can be spending. And in fact, I think it's actually better to stick to the sort of more default colors for now. Okay, so now we have our we have our chart and so on. We're happy with it, But what about getting, of course, more charts on here, different markets and so on. So this actually introduces a very good situation where we can lead on and say, you can, of course, go and do file and then do find symbol and then find another relevant market, and that'll pull up the chart. But another quicker way, since you do have your first chart, is to go here at the top right, click on this middle button, the restore down, and you can see how we have we've manipulated the sizing of our chart, and we can sort of resize it to our heart's content. But what this also allows us to do is that if we look very closely here at the duplicate chart, so if we click on this top left little white icon, we can see we get this menu, and then we can duplicate chart, and it'll do so very instantly. It will put it right on top, so you should move it, and there we have the exact same chart. Now, what I usually the reason I usually recommend this is because this will actually help in just setting up your workspace extremely quickly and not worry so much about your default settings, because you've set one setting for one chart, and then you have to go to the other. And then what you can quickly do is you can click on the new chart, you can go to chart and then chart settings, and here you can keep pretty much everything the same and say, look, I don't want on this chart, I don't want the Bund, I want the Euro stocks, for example. And then you can either type in the code if you know it off by heart, or you can go in and say, look for the Euro stocks. But in this case, since we know the Euro stocks, we can go put in the Euro stocks code, keep the contract month, keep the year, and then depending on what data trade setting you'll have, you may or may not have to put in the exchange. You can hit OK, it has changed, and then we can go apply. And then once we do so, you'll notice we've changed the chart up here. The Sierra has recognized the fact that we want the Euro Stocks 50, and now it is downloading data. And the great part about Sierra is the fact that all this data you're saving is in fact saved locally on your computer. So once you've saved all this data, for example, for the Bund, and now we are for the Euro Stocks, you will not have to spend every single time waiting for this data, because it will be locally on your computer, and it can load that much faster on your computer. Okay, so we now reached a juncture where we have, let's say, two charts. Now this will lead us very nicely into explaining how we want to manage our windows, and I really suggest thinking about this part, because usually a lot of people like to just throw so many charts into Sierra. There's no real organization, and then they end up with a very complicated system of dealing with it. So the first thing I'd like to mention is every chart you will bring up, you will send it to a chart book up here. And this is within a tab-like system. So if I now go to File and then click on New Chart Book, you can see that we flipped to Chartbook 2. To get our old charts back, we just very clearly go to Chartbook 1. And in doing so, we can see in Chartbook 1, we have these two charts. You can check right at the bottom, the tabs. We have our Bund and we have our Euro stocks. And this is a very efficient way to just sort of quickly glance and organize, because what most people will end up doing when they're new to Sierra chart is they keep one chart book. They have 15 different, 20 different charts, and they're all scattered around, and it makes it very inefficient to find everything. And as my recommendation, until you may have very specific needs or preferences, is to actually keep one market, one market per chart book. So what you can do is dedicate, let's say, Chartbook 1 to the Bund, and you can dedicate Chartbook 2 to the Euro stocks. And you can go into Chartbook 2 and then say, find symbol and pull up the Euro stocks. But an even quicker way, again, is to click at the top left on this white symbol, and then find not duplicate chart, but duplicate chart to Chartbook. And in doing so, you can click on the relevant one you want to send it to and hit OK. And then what happens is, if we go on Chartbook 2, we have our Euro stocks. And then you can go back, delete your Euro stocks, and then you have a pure Bund dedicated chart book. But in our case, we want to keep these chart books just for further demonstration. And what I'll do now is, in fact, duplicate two more charts, because now we can talk about this extremely useful window tab here, where again you notice a lot of people are just spending all day trying to size and resize their charts, which is quite inefficient because a lot of the time you can go into your window and then you have all these options here that automatically help you sort out your front end. So if I now show that one more time, we go to window and then you have tile horizontally, tile vertically, tile as grid, vertically or horizontally. So if we just explain some of them, so if I do tile horizontally, we will get this. If we do tile vertically, we will get this kind of layout. But of course, if we do window tile as grid, then it makes something a bit more intuitive to use. And then you can see, up here, I've got the Bund, the Euro stocks, and of course, two more Euro stocks charts because I've just duplicated. But then if I so want, I can go here and do another chart settings, and change the symbol, our desired symbol again. And so spend a bit of time really looking through this window and just understanding how we handle charts. And one more useful feature is this option here. So if you click on window and then you do detach attach window, and in doing so we can do this, where we have now this Bund chart is still attached to Chartbook 1, but is now we can move it independently outside the CR chart window. And if I so wish, if you have a multiple monitor setup, I can now take this chart and just move it onto another screen which you cannot see, but you can move it to whichever side. And this is also very useful because if you have a multiple chartbook layout, you can keep everything in one chartbook, and then when you flip it, it will hide the other charts from the other windows if you so wish, or you can move it to another window and then you can do window always visible, which means that independently of how you move it, you move it across chart books, it should it should remain there, except for the fact that in this case the reason why we cannot see it anymore is because I clicked on Windows always visible. I will detach it, but then we're getting the same kind of issue. If you are getting this, you can go to your taskbar, and then you can notice that the windows have been detached or treated as different windows. You find your chart, and then you go to window, and then you do always on top, which will mean that now no matter what I do, I can flip anywhere and my chart stays in the same place. So if that is a useful feature for you, if you want this chart to never disappear off your screen or off another screen while you're flipping through chart books, you can go ahead and turn these two features on, always on top and windows always visible. But in our case, I want to reattach our window. I want to go back to our Sierra here in case you've lost it. Click on it, and then I just want to reattach this window. And again, you notice I can this window is out of scale. I can easily resize it and so on. But again, if all your charts are a mess or something because you've moved them around too much, you can always go back to window and then tile as horizontally or vertically, and so on. Okay, so now we can move on to chart navigation. So again, this is something which feels a bit, should we say, clunky for people who move to Sierra because they're used to certain software packages where, for example, if I hold left click into the background of the chart and I just move, I can freely move around. I can freely move around the chart, and they get a bit frustrated that they can't do so. But chart navigation is very simple to use and actually much more customizable on Sierra chart to exactly how you want to do it. Now, my usual recommendation is that if you go here to tools, you find that most of the time you are on the default pointer, which is just a mouse. But if you click on the hand tool and now we move it, you can see that now if I drag, I can actually drag the chart as you would usually want by left click and holding down the mouse button. Of course, you only go far as back as much data as you've downloaded. If you've downloaded more than this, you can keep scrolling till you reach the end. But essentially, this gives me the option. What you can also do for very quick navigation is, if I want to zoom in and out, I can hold the x-axis, which has the dates on this chart, and I can hold left click and move the chart in and out. And what also happens is, if I now move left click on the y-axis, which are the prices, I can expand or contract the chart. Now, usually what can happen here is this, this might be fine for a while, but then you switch your chart and all of a sudden it's locked, or it may not let you move this, may not navigate as easily. What you should do then is quickly right click on the y-axis, which gives you this menu here. Now, this is a very useful menu because much of the time, if you click on range, interactive scale range at the top, it'll do exactly what we just did, where we can expand, contract. But what we can also do is, if we click on move, we will now left click and we can just move around this way. So if I have my hand tool, I can move left and right and up and down. And again, this is much more customizable. You can move even more freely than this, but as a starting point, this is an easy way to navigate around the chart. And if you saw from earlier, if I right click, you can see that there's an interactive scale locked, which if I click that, it means that I've locked the chart. I cannot move in no matter what happens. But usually you like to leave it on just interactive scale move. And if I right click again, much of the time this you can leave this by itself, except this reset will be very useful, because if you've messed around with your chart a lot and it's a complete mess, or the chart is, let's say you've left this chart on all day and the Bund has bid all day long and it's now off your chart, and it looks something like this, then you can just do right click on the y-axis, click reset, and we're now back to the center of the chart, very nice and cleanly. Now, one little small change you can do is the fact that if I would use the scroll button, so if I'm now moving the scroll button on my mouse, you can see that I'm moving left and right and so on. And then if I hold shift, you can zoom in and out while I'm moving the mouse button. But what happens is you can change the default settings of this to, for this feature to behave a bit differently. And to do so, you would go to global graphics setting, global settings, and then general settings. And by going to general settings, you will find this window here. But for our purposes, what we're interested in is general 2. And then if you look right at the bottom right of the screen, you can see scroll wheel, and it gives us the current setting we are on. In which case, scroll wheel scrolls the chart, and then if I hold shift, it changes the spacing, i.e. the zooming in and out. And so, for example, if I want to do the opposite, where the scroll wheel changes the spacing, I want to zoom in and out with the spacing, and I want to scroll the chart if I hold shift. So if I select this setting and I hit apply, I can now see that if I move if I move the scroll button, I can zoom in and out, and if I hold shift, it will do the opposite as before, where I can move left and right. Okay, now that we've looked at finding our relevant charts, organizing our charts, customizing them, we may also be interested in putting on certain indicators, or in which case, if we're interested in putting in the market profile and the footprint chart, we can all find them in here. If you go to analysis and you go to studies, this is the window where you can add for the relevant chart studies or some kind of technical tools. So for example, if I were to scroll all the way down, I can find whichever relevant one. So for example, if I like to put on a moving average, I can go all the way down to the moving average, since it's all alphabetical. And for example, I can add a for the simple moving average. And to do so, you can click add or just double click. And then essentially everything in this right window is what will be in the chart. And if I just go ahead now, very default, and just do apply, you'll see that we have the default moving average applied on Sierra. Now, this brings us to the next point, where this is the default setting, but what if you like to change anything? To do so, you can either double click or choose settings, on that relevant study, and it'll give you this window, which is essentially nearly all the same for all technical studies. Most of the time you'll be interested in just the few settings up here, in which case for the moving average, if you want to change the length from 100 period to, let's say, 50 period, I can do that and then just hit apply, and you can see it's applied it. Another few interesting things may be useful to you. If you go to subgraphs, that's usually the case where we can handle all the coloring, the colors and the style of, let's say, how we want to draw things, the thickness, and sometimes we can also, for example, put on this very useful tool where the value label, where if I now just click on this and I hit apply, you can see that the Sierra will highlight the value of that tool on our our y-axis, the price axis, in case we have many labels, and it's just much easier to see where we are. And of course, if I want to change the color or something, I can do so. Let's say change it to red and just hit apply. We can we can see that. Now what usually happens is a lot of people will and just this very simple concept will save you an incredible amount of frustration and time, and it'll make your workflow very efficiently. What a lot of people do will now click on, they're happy with what they do, and then they just do apply, and then they close. And then they want to put on another moving average, and then they go to studies, try and do the whole thing again, and it takes up a lot of time. If, for example, you want to do something only once and you want to do, duplicate, you always have the duplicate option. But what I would recommend is if you have a very general study which you want to have on all of your charts or on many of your charts, what you should do is this. You go to your analysis and you click on studies. You find your collection of indicators or studies and so on. And once you've added them, let's say I want a moving average, and let's choose something at random. Let's say I want pivot points, and I have this collection. What you can then do is this: save studies as a study collection. And you'd enter the name here and just say moving average plus pivot. Call it something you recognize it by, and then do save all. Make sure you have this window come up, save all settings, and I click yes. And in doing so, not only have we applied, but we have now created this situation where if we click onto analysis, we can see that actually our grouping has now come up here, and this will always stay in Sierra regardless what you do. And this will very easily allow you to turn your overlays off and then turn them on. And even better is the fact that if you were to remove these, if I were to remove these and then say I want to take these off and create another study, and I would like, let's say, let's do something here, the high and low for the time period. Okay, I would like this. You can now give this another name, high, low, and then we can save it there, and then just do save all, and then just click yes. And it's applied the new high and low for whatever period we're looking at. But again, if we go to analysis, we can see that now we have our high-low grouping, and this is our moving average plus pivot. So we can now click on this, we can switch, and then switch back again. And this is an extremely efficient way where you can switch between different overlays of your own making very efficiently. So now I can easily just click on another chart. You should remember to click on the chart you want. So let's say you click on Euro stocks. Okay, I want here the moving average and pivot. Okay, there we go. On another Euro stocks, I want the high and low. Okay, on this one, I want this, the moving average again. Or let's say on this chart, I don't want anything, and I can just have there's a default setting here, clean charts, and there I can clean them. So this concept of saving everything as a study collection will save you an incredible amount of time and effort in with your workflow generally within Sierra. Okay, so there should be two more basic things we want to mention in this sort of section, where firstly, as I mentioned earlier in the video, if you go to analysis and studies, this is now the place where you will find market profile and the footprint charts. In which case, they are actually called differently within Sierra. So in Sierra, the market profile is called a TPO chart. So you can find it if it's alphabetical. We can go right here and then find TPO chart and other sort of attachments. We can put on top of it other overlays, but our basic one is the TPO profile chart. We can double click on that, and if you just directly click apply, we can see that it has defaulted, it has gone to the default settings, the default view. And this is how we get our profile charts. If we would so like, of course, to change the default settings, you would go into this section here. You can see that actually, once you put the TPO profile, it changes its name based on the chart, and if you scroll across, it says TPO, just to be aware. But then if you double click, we can go to settings and inputs, and you can see that for the profile there's a huge amount of settings, and this is the reason why we will have our a completely independent standalone video explaining exactly how to get set up the way we're set up usually for profiles. But for right now, this is the settings, and the subgraphs, of course, is where it controls the coloring. So for example, if you want your TPO letter block color to not be green, you'd want it something else, let's say red, you can change it there, and you can see it's now changed. So that is where you'd find your market profile. Now, again, if I want to save this market profile, do so and call it, let's say, MP market profile, and I do save all. Save all settings, yes. I can hit apply, and once more, I can go to analysis and say, I don't want this clean chart, or let's say I'm on, on these. I have like these pivot points and moving averages, but actually I want my profile chart, and you can click on MP, and it's already gone to your profile. Now the footprint in Sierra are called number bars. So again, if I just remove this previous market profile, and now I go to N for number bars, I can find it here. I can add them, and as soon as I hit apply, you can see that we have a bit of an error window. You can just do apply quickly, close this down. And then what you usually get is this kind of situation in here where like, at first you might say, where's my number bars? Why haven't I, this just looks like a strange candlestick. But of course with number bars, you really must zoom in. And the way you zoom in is just by dragging the, by default, you can drag the y-axis all the way in, and then you can see your footprint. And then of course by dragging, you want to right click, you can do range. So now you can scrunch up your your y-axis to really just clarify the chart. This is now on the 1 minute, which makes it look a bit strange sometimes, especially when it's slow. But if I change time frame, 5 minute, and so on, I'll explain again how to do these. But for very default, for very quick view, this is a 5 minute. I can go up here to the control bar and say, look, I can see a 5 minute. So perhaps if I click a 10 minute, there's a 10 minute, half an hour. And each time I change time frame, I may have to just drag and play around a bit. And this is where our footprint is. And of course, this has gone to the very basic sort of default footprint. But again, we will make an entire video just on how to customize your footprint by itself. And one more time for clarity, if we want to move, to scrunch this up and down, you want to right click and then do scale range. And again, if this is the footprint, let's say you do analysis, studies, give it a name, and then just do save all. Okay, so now we've dealt with the analysis, the studies, the overlays. One thing that might interest you is, drawing things like lines, trend lines, channels, and so on. That is not within the analysis part, that is within the tools part. So if I click on tools, you can see very immediately that I have options to draw maybe, an extended line, horizontal line, ray, channels. I can type some text on my chart, all sorts of various things, which should be quite common to a lot of chart users. So let's say in here, if I choose, let's say, a horizontal line, I can then click anywhere on my chart, and it's just drawn, if I click again, it's just drawn a horizontal line, which will stay there. Now, a lot of the time, the default one might be acceptable for most, but I think there's a few more quality of life changes we can make very quickly. And what you can do is this. You can right click on your line, you can do chart drawing properties, and you'll find the settings for your line. So for example, it's now green. You can change the style, you can change the thickness of the line. But what is really useful are these, the labels. So if I click now on the price, you can see that the price has come up right next to the price axis. You can very quickly glance at what the price is. And I'll also recommend, for example, to do, we put on price, but I would like a, I don't want it at the bottom there. Maybe I want it at the top. It's personal preference. In any case, you go to chart drawing properties. You would say, I want price to be shown up. And then once you do so, once you're happy with, let's say, the color, let's change that to red, make it slightly thicker. Okay, I now want this as the default line because I do not want to spend every single time I put on a line. I don't want to go back in and change this, of course, every single time. So what you should do now is if you go to the config number down here, you can click on whichever one you'd like, but the default selection will always be TC1. So you click on TC1, and then let's just give it a config name, call it, let's just call it default if I can spell. And this is now our, the name we're going to give it, and make sure to click save. And to check that now is if I quickly go on TC2, there's defaulted to whatever TC2 is, and then I can go back on TC1 and you can see that it's now gone back to our settings. So for now, if I take another, if I go to tools and click on another horizontal, do another horizontal line, I can see that it's already, done the exact same, style. And of course, if we go back to chart drawing properties, we can see that in fact I can actually go on, TC2. Let's say I want a different style. Let's say orange. I want it even thicker, and then I can give this a name. I can save it, and then you can see if I flick back between these lines, I have my preset drawings. And that can really be done for all things. So for example, if I now put on a linear regression channel here, if I, let's say, draw it on this chart, if I right click on it, I can go to chart drawing properties. You have all the options here, and so on, and then you can pull up TC1, give it a name, and then just hit save, and then that will be your default properties for that. Now, lastly, the other sort of mini quality of life feature we can use is the fact that if we've really drawn too much on our chart, or you really want to keep your charts clean as they should be, you can go to tools, and then you can go to erase all non-text drawings. And if you do so, I'll ask you, would you like to do it? Yes. And then you can see on the chart that you just previously clicked, it has now erased all the tools. It will only erase the things you can draw on the chart, because it hasn't removed the analysis, because that is a different domain, as it were. So that just removes things that you may have drawn on the chart. So that is the basics of dealing with both your indicators, things you like to draw on your chart, and where to find the footprint and the market profile. Okay, so one other thing I think everyone should really set up right from the beginning, and this will improve their workflow, their speed, and just the general comfort of using CRM, is editing this control bar situation up here, where, if you notice, much of the time you have a large selection of shortcuts, of buttons, and so on. But much of the time, for me personally, I may not use half of these, and it just takes up space, or you lose, for example, the most important things. So the way to edit this bar a lot of the time, or the only time really, is if you right click within the sort of the strip or the vicinity of it, and you right click and you do customize control bar 1. Now we are given this window here. And just like our study situation, you can add or you can remove the features you'd like. So for example, on the right side, this is already what's featured up here. So let's say I want to keep the status bar, this up here, which is the green, because I want to be aware in case we lose connection. So I want to keep that, I don't want to remove it. Okay. But for example, I'm not really interested in the closed chartbook feature, so I can just remove that. and then let's say I want to remove date rate settings. I'm not going to change that very often. I can remove that. Connect to data feed. I can also remove that because you can bind it to a shortcut. Let's remove these. This chart navigation I prefer to do with mouse personally. So let's say I can remove these. And in doing so, if I now click OK, you can see the fact that it's removed a lot of them, and we can now get closer to the kind of shortcuts we'd want. So this is the kind of area where you just build your own personal shortcuts just for ease of use. So if I now, again, go back to customize and click on control bar 1, I'll want to say, well, look, I have these preset, daily, 1 minute, 5 minute, 10 minute, but let's say I want to add, a different one, let's say. So the way you do that is by looking for the relevant title, and then say, let's look for the chart bar period, and you can see that there's more waiting for you here. Let's say I would want a 15-minute shortcut, and then I would do add. Now what will happen is it will actually add it right to the bottom, which for our purposes is actually fairly close because it's within the same category. But let's say I just want to move it right between the 10 and the 30-minute. I can click on it and then click on this button, move up, which will move it up, and then move down if I miss the mark. And then here we are very nicely. And if I do OK, you can see it's added the button just here. So now if I go back again into my control bar customization, I can look to do the same thing. And one thing I really recommend for most people to do is if you go to your tools, you can look at the most common things you may draw. So for most people that would be something like a horizontal line tool. You can add it, add it to the bottom. Let's keep it there. And the other thing I always use in my as a shortcut is the hand tool, and you can add the hand tool, and then depending where you want to keep it, but let's keep it at the bottom for now. And then we just do OK, and you can see here horizontal line. I click on horizontal line and I click where I want to put it, and you can already see that it's already defaulted to our TC1 setting because we saved that earlier, which is great. And then let's say I don't want to keep putting lines, I want to move, so I just go on the hand tool, and then I'm free to move around as I please. So that is really one of the best places you can invest to spend a lot of time in and just really get your grips of just being comfortable of making them. And of course, what you can also do is the fact that the Sierra already has more than one control bar. In fact, it has many. So now if I go on control bar 2, it's given me the default control bar 2. But let's say I only want a few things here. So then I can do right click on that strip so I can see control bar 2. And let's say I only want to keep, let's make this up. Let's say I only want to keep the back end, the time frame here. So I can just do, I can remove nearly everything, just for our example. And then I can hit OK, and you can see that we just have this. But let's say I don't want to keep everything here. I can now just go to Window, Control Bars, and you can see it. I have Control Bar 1 and 2 selected. I can now just deselect Control Bar 2, and it's been removed. And lastly, what you can also do is you can attach this control bar, around your screen, so you can attach it to the bottom, to the left of the screen, to the right, or keep it at the default top part of your screen. Okay, so now we've reached sort of the end of the first episode of the crash course, series. So one last thing I'd like to mention, of course, is saving your chartbook and saving your workspace, which I recommend you do very often, as much as possible. As a good habit. And usually you can do that by going to File and then just doing Save All. Now, what will happen now in our case is if we do Save All, it will ask us to name our files. So you can see Chartbook 1 up here because that's the default name. Let's say, as I recommended before, if you keep one chartbook per market, so let's say I keep Chartbook 1 for Bund, I can just call it directly Bund, and I can hit Save. And now it'll ask me Chartbook 2. So you can see how now Chartbook 1 has now been renamed to Bund. Chartbook 2 up there, I can now say I only want it for Euro stocks, so I can put in stocks here, and I can do Save. And now both have been saved, under custom name. since we're on this topic, if we go to File and then do Open Chartbook, you can already see that the fact that we've saved these. You can see when you've modified them. And if you were to close one of these chart books, like let's say stocks, if I do File, Close Chartbook, would you like to save any changes? Yes. And you can see we only have Bund. Let's say I want to reopen it. I can go to File, File, Open Chartbook, and then I have my stocks up here. I can double click on that, and immediately we pull up the data. And since there's been no other fresh data since we downloaded, you can see how very fast Sierra has pulled up all the data. You don't have to restream or re-download the data every single time. And that is essentially the way you want to save and deal with all your charts. Whenever you make big changes, let's say you rearrange your workspace completely, please remember to save all. Sierra is extremely stable as a software product. But generally, as a principle, your computer might crash or blow up or something. So you never want to assume it'll be safe. Just do File, Save, and then you should be fine. Okay, guys, that brings us to the end of the first episode of the crash course. I really hope you've found it very useful. There's many more videos to follow. We're gonna talk about a bit more in detail how you manage your files, how to copy files. A lot of quality of life improvements, so you can use Sierra extremely quick and efficient, and a few more bits and bobs. And once that sort of mini video series is done, I'll come along and make a very detailed video on how you can get deep dive into setting up your profile chart and set up your footprints. And generally, looking at feedback, we hope to get perhaps an FAQ video or something of that sort. Thank you very much, guys.
If you find this video interesting, if you want to go deep into the Axia training method and how our trading team of 7-figure traders develop setups and strategies and how they learn to build the most profitable trades across all market environments, then join me in this workshop. Now, in this workshop, you're going to learn 3 powerful steps we use to train all our traders on both our London and our Poland trading desks to help build incredible levels of consistency. How to predictably understand which setups work and which don't. You're going to learn our 2 main strategies for how we perfect our trade timing before we enter every single trade. You're going to learn the VEL concept, which is our one and only technique we use to leverage our largest trades. You'll also learn how to avoid trading setups that don't work, how to avoid those large losses, and our main method we use to identify them that saves our traders significant amounts of capital. Finally, you will learn how our traders use the power of network learning to find market patterns quicker than ever before, so you shortcut that learning curve. In the workshop, we want to program your awareness of elite performance, to program your ability to choose the right setups, and program your ability to be a consistent trader. So the trades that you execute become more simple and clearer. And I can tell you this, you'll never see the markets the same again. You'll never look at the markets with a narrow view of getting lost in all the noise and confusion. You'll take your first step towards a deep edge market awareness. I cannot wait for you to join me in this workshop. And I think you're in for a massive paradigm shift in your understanding of how to develop as a trader. So join me by clicking on the top right-hand corner of the screen and sign up for this powerful training workshop, or visit elitetraderworkshop.com.